Meanwhile, this coming Monday, CBSN will be bringing you live reports from the new Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington. We're going to take a look at the history of the museum itself, in fact, as well as the important events that it does commemorate. And here to discuss his experiences as the mayor of Richmond, Virginia, once the capital of the Confederacy, is Senator and Vice Presidential nominee Tim Kaine. Of course, when he was mayor, Kaine offered the first formal apology for Richmond's role in the slave trade. And when he was governor of the state of Virginia, it became the first state to apologize for slavery. And the Democratic vice presidential nominee, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, good enough to join me now here on set. Senator, it's great to have you.
You bet, Josh. Great to be with you.
We do want to get to some news of the day in just a moment, but I want to begin with the National Museum of African American History and Culture that will be opening. What does it mean specifically at this place in this country's time for that to exist?
It's huge. I mean, we're in. You get to 2019, and it's the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first African slaves to Jamestown, Virginia, so into the English colonies. So we're coming up on a very, very powerful 400th anniversary of 400 years of a lot of suffering, a lot of triumph over adversity, so many stories to be told, so many stories that haven't been told yet that need to be told. And so having that museum open right there on the mall, you know, inside of the Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial, it's time. And I think the way they've collected artifacts from families all over the country, there's artifacts that they've found and probably had in the Smithsonian for years, but also families have lent or given history to the museum, and so it's going to be a real people's museum. It's very exciting.
Before you actually got into politics, you were a civil rights lawyer.
Yep,
you fought
in Richmond, Virginia.
Housing discrimination there. Your wife and yourself have attended a mostly African American church for
32 years.
Well over three decades, and you've sent your children to very diverse public schools there in Richmond. These are important choices. Why'd you make them?
I took a year off in the middle of law school and went and worked in Honduras with Jesuit missionaries and really got the public service gene from them. But it was in Honduras that I read an interesting piece, a line of Martin Luther King's that really stuck with me. The most segregated hour in the week is 11 o'clock Sunday morning. I'm a religious person. I decided, wow, that really speaks to my condition. And so when I came back to the United States, I decided I wanted to try to worship in settings that were primarily African American, where they weren't just segregated as my own church had been growing up. And so have just found a real home in a diverse Catholic parishes. First a church, St. Peter Claver in Macon, Georgia, when I was a federal law clerk, and now St. Elizabeth's in Richmond. And then that just kind of created a whole life path for me of civil rights work, fighting housing discrimination. My wife's family has a powerful civil rights story that she's been involved in since she was a kid. And we support public schools because we love public education, and we think part of what makes public education work is the involved parents who make it work, and we wanted to be involved parents.
And Virginia does have a complicated history with regard to slavery. You have twice issued formal apologies for it as the mayor of Richmond and then the governor of the state. Do you think the president should follow suit?
Look, I think it is a great thing to do, and I'll tell you why I did it. I was the mayor of a city that was one of the 2 or 3 main centers of the slave trade in the United States, and there were formal policies that the city embraced that not only defended but promoted slavery. And I felt like officially the mayor's office, the city should apologize for that history. And then similarly, when I got to be governor, look, my legislature meets in a legislative chamber where the Confederate States of America met. But long before that, where the laws of Virginia were put in place to defend and promote slavery. And I felt it was important for the governor to do a formal acknowledgement of the state's role and apologize for it. An apology is not the end of a discussion, it's the beginning of a discussion, but it's a discussion that I think still needs to take place, and that's one of the reasons why the museum opening is so important, because it will inspire a lot of discussions that are necessary.
And let that happen, indeed. I want to ask you about the first intelligence briefing that you received yesterday. It came as news of North Korea's 5th nuclear test surfaced as well. We heard Donald Trump 2 nights ago at the Commander-in-Chief Forum telling Matt Lauer about a confidential briefing that he'd received. As you heard what he was saying, What was your reaction?
I thought it was outrageous. I did receive an intelligence briefing, and I've received them as a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees. You don't talk about what people tell you in those briefings. You just don't. And that's the understanding that you have going in. Of course, I have to make decisions and judgments, and I'm going to make them based upon material I hear there or material I learn elsewhere. But to quote others or say, you know, people felt this way or that way, here were people who had disagreed with President Obama about things, no one does that. Anybody understands going into an intelligence briefing that you maintain the confidentiality and discretion of the folks who are briefing you.
He has consistently questioned the physical stamina and rigorousness of Hillary Clinton. What do you make of what he is perhaps trying to get at?
Well, he's also questioned repeatedly whether President Obama was born in the United States. He won't concede President Obama's citizenship. So I'm not surprised that he's challenging Hillary Clinton's health. Two things. First, Hillary's been running this race for 17 months. I've been at it in the last 100 days. That's the way to run a campaign. Just get at it in the last 100 days. I have a hard time keeping up with her. I mean, it is an incredibly grueling process, and I can attest to her stamina and energy, 100% guarantee. But when he says, as he did the other day, I think it was Monday, we were doing Labor Day events, and he said, she doesn't look very presidential, does she, fellas? I just think anybody hearing that understands exactly what he's saying. He is challenging her because of her gender. She is trying to crack a glass ceiling in a nation that not only has never had a woman president. In Congress right now, we're 19% women. That's the most we've ever been, but that ranks us 75th in the world. Iraq has 26% women in their National Assembly. Afghanistan has 28%. We're below the global average. We're a country that, for a variety of reasons, has made it particularly difficult for women to hold federal office. And one of the reasons is because of attitudes like Donald Trump's that he's displaying in a very open and patent way. The great thing about the museum that's opening, the great thing about our country, is that it's a tribute to the fact that we set out a North Star, and the North Star was we're a nation of equality. And our whole history is progressing toward that goal, and we've got to fight back against those who would suggest you can't be president because your skin color is wrong or because your gender is wrong. That's the history that we're living, and it's exciting to be part of an election that I believe is going to knock down one of those barriers that's been in the way of women holding higher office in this country.
I also want to ask you about something that Secretary Clinton said yesterday on the tarmac here in White Plains, New York. When asked about why this is at this point, perhaps the poll suggests it's a statistical dead heat. She said she always expected this to be a close race. Considering the portrait of the GOP nominee that we've seen painted by you and others, why do you think that is?
Because we're a nation of diverse opinions. I encouraged Hillary to run in late April of 2014, so about a year before she got in, and I gave a speech and I said she should run, and we talked about it a day or two after, and I said, but let me tell you something, this is going to be incredibly hard. We don't know who the Republican nominee will be, but it will be incredibly hard, and I hope you'll consider yourself the underdog until they call you the winner. I don't care what any poll says. I come from a state where races are close. Virginia has moved from sort of red to battleground, but we're just used to really close, very difficult elections. And so what Hillary and I have to do between now and November 8 is just make our best case every day about her qualifications, her experience, her judgment, and her commitment, that commitment to families and children that are going to make her an excellent president. We got to make our case every day, and that's what we're doing.
We've certainly appreciated the time. I want to get you out of here on this one. As she faces new questions about her emails every day, and the polls suggest that her answers have not satisfied yet a deeply doubtful electorate, if you will. I'm also struck by the characterizations of her responses. And given that the GOP nominee seems to have turned this election into as much a referendum on personality as it is policy, I was struck by something that she told Humans of New York, and I want to read this to you because it jumped off the page at me yesterday. I know that I can be perceived as aloof or cold or unemotional, but I had to learn as a young woman to control my emotions, and that's a hard path to walk because you need to protect yourself, you need to keep steady, but at the same time you don't want to seem walled off. And sometimes I think I come across more in the walled off arena, and if I create that perception, then I take responsibility. I don't view myself as cold or unemotional, and neither do my friends and neither does my family, but if that sometimes is the perception I can create, then I can't blame people for thinking that. At a time then, perhaps in this race, when optics are as important as anything. What do you make of that characterization of Hillary Clinton of herself?
I think it demonstrates a great degree of self-awareness. And that Hillary, look, on the email question, she said, I made a mistake and I've learned something and I apologize. And here she's saying, people may perceive me one way, and I think I understand why a little bit. Look, women who grew up at that era, or even today, face a whole lot of challenges. You know, be yourself, but if you display emotions, you're going to get downgraded for that. It's a tough, tough line to walk. I mean, I know from having been married to a very strong professional woman for 32 years, I think she's faced some challenges in forging a professional career that I haven't faced. And I've seen her do it with a great degree of skill and joy and build a great public service career, but it's been really difficult. And then you add to it the challenges of balancing a professional life with being a mom, with being a grandmother, with being a spouse. Those challenges tend to still not be 50-50 challenges where the males and females in relationships take exactly even Steven. I wouldn't be honest if I said in our relationship, my wife Ann and I, that I've done 50-50 of all of the work of raising kids and doing work on the home. So professional women today who are dealing with those challenges, not just professional women, any women who are dealing with those challenges, it's a tough line to walk. But I can say this about Hillary Clinton. I know her. I've watched her interact with Mark and Chelsea and Charlotte and Aiden. I've watched her worry backstage in a hot factory on a bus tour when Bill Clinton was looking a little tired and said, hey, why don't we go sit down for a little bit and talk, and paying attention to him. I was on a bus tour with her, and she was worried about the bus driver on the tour who was trying to get some FaceTime with her kids back home in Georgia as we were in the middle of a political discussion, and she's now focusing on the bus driver trying to get a few minutes to talk to her kids back home. This is a multitasking person with a great deal of warmth and compassion, but she's had to kind of, you know, stiffen her backbone and kind of gird up to fight the battles that she's fought. But she is a fighter, and that's what people want in the White House. They want a fighter, somebody who's not going to back down, and that's who Hillary Clinton is.
Well, you mentioned you joined for the Bell Lap. The Bell Lap has begun.
Yeah, indeed it has.
Senator Kaine, best of luck with the rest of the campaign. We really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, very good to be with you. Thanks, Josh.